All right, so what we'll do is we'll talk about the value model today, value model definition, and the next two sessions will be about how do you validate that, right? So first we are defining it, then we'll validate it, right? And what we did last time, just to recap so that we can start from there, is talk about how you can define a user model, which is who's your customer and what are their pain points, right? So the basic idea is to always start with a specific use case in mind, right? And even if you have a new innovation, a new product or new technology, which can be applied to many possible scenarios, the idea is to eventually pick one use case, and the way to do that is to first identify all possible use cases for which you will need to talk to potential customers. Even the customers that you think are likely not be your customer, that you don't think they are the right customer, even then it's good to actually go talk to them. So that's the number one point. Second is to look at these input and output parameters, which are the quantitative ways of looking at what the use cases are, and cluster them together, right? In the output, we talked about the revenue proximity. Now, for a lot of people, revenue might not be the only one. So what I'll change is to call it outcome proximity. Revenue is a normal outcome, which is, most people use that. But in some scenarios, the outcome can also be a substitute for revenue, right? And an example for that was one person, Abhishek, who mentioned on the group, saying on the ARTPARK Spark group, saying they're looking to build a waste management product, right? And that product, the outcome of that is not revenue. It possibly could be compliance. It could be regulatory requirements, right? So outcome can also be used as substitute revenue. But you look at the output and input as two quantitative parameters and see which use cases, where do they land up in this 3x3 matrix. The third step is to calculate the market size for each of the use cases that you identify in a bottom-up manner. And you basically want to say you will pick use cases which are above a threshold. Now, what is this above threshold? This above threshold is not $1 billion. $1 billion is the aggregate market size that you want. A single use case need not be $1 billion. That can be much smaller. If you remember last time when we did the calculation for 1090, if you assume 1 million users, delivery partners, each of them paying, let's say, 50 rupees max, right, to use the service, your market size is 50 million rupees, right, which is 5 crore rupees, right, which is not $1 billion by any stretch, right? So, but that's okay. It gets you started. It gets you to validate your product. So that's what the market size is. Aggregate market size should be more than $1 billion. A single use case need not be $1 billion. That's number 3. Number 4, you have to actually see, and this is where the user research comes in, you have to actually see if the inputs or outputs, the expectations, requirements are changing. If they're changing, and that tells you it's a good time to do a startup. If they're not changing, then it's maybe not the best time to do that startup. Now, this change can also be because there's a technology change that happened, that you can visualize, that you can apply, and you can give a much better solution to your customers. So the output expectation might not change from customer, but you know that you can actually give much better value to your customer, therefore they will eventually come around. So that's perfectly fine, right? So that's basically the thing. So with that, actually I talked about all of this. So, but basically these are the 3 things. Eventually you want to come to a single use case by applying these filters, right? So with that, what we'll do is now talk about the value model. So we know who our customers are. We know what their problems are, pain points are. And now the question becomes, what's the best way to, bridge that pain point gap, deliver value to them, right? And that's what I call value model, right? Now, the thing is, it's kind of obvious what you want to do. You want to build a product, right? But I think there's a little bit nuance to it, and that's what we'll do today, right? And we'll do that in 2 steps. So first step is you have to look at a specific approach. There are 3 different approaches. I'll talk about it soon. But you have to pick one approach that you think is most appropriate for you to build your product, right? Number 1. Number 2, you have to look at what kind of company are you trying to build? What is the kind, what is your DNA, and does it get reflected in the startup that you want to build, right? Because the startup founders and startup actually have very close association. You can't build a startup which is very different from who you are as an individual, right? So that's where, so two parts we'll talk about it. But before that, I'll ask this question. Anyone knows what this place is? Kanyakumari, perfect. This is the Kanyakumari Mandir, yeah? And this is the more commonly observed picture, which is the, all right, so let's get to the value model. Now there are three ways in which you can create value for your customers, right? And these three ways are, number one is performance, which is that you can build a product which delivers higher quality of service or better experience to your customers. So that's number one. Number two is you can reduce the effort required to use the product. So you're not giving higher quality, higher performance, but you're making sure they are spending less effort, less money to use your product. And if you over-index on money, which is total cost of ownership, TCO, then you have a third strategy. So you can reduce the cost of the product to basically enter the market. So these are the three different strategies. And we can put them in three different things. So if you use performance as your core single focus area, then what you would say is, I'm using performance-led strategy. If you use effort and you make it easier for people to use a product or make it more convenient, that's your effort-led strategy. And if you go on the third thing, which is basically cost, and you make it cheaper for users your potential customers to use your product, then that's costless strategy, right? So let's look at with the example. Right? Long ago, there was only one airlines in India, Indian Airlines, right? And then came, well, actually it didn't come first, but let's go with this. So when Indigo came, or when Deccan Airways came, what they did was they said, we will reduce the cost that people have to bear to fly, right? So they reduced the flight tickets. And what we discussed last time was that the way they did that was by unbundling things and by basically focusing only on the flight as the only core thing and not worrying about rest of the things, right? So that's what is the one possibility. You can focus on cost, reduce the cost of using your products, and that gives you an entry into the market, right? Or there's another way, which is what Vistara did, or actually the original one which did that was Jet Airways, right? So when they came into the market, they did not say they will make it cheaper for you to fly. They said, Indian Airlines already exists. We will give you a better experience. We'll make it better for you to fly which is where, if anyone flew Kingfisher? No one has flown Kingfisher? Okay, there are few, okay. So the Kingfisher, what in the beginning, initial days, what they would do is, they would give you these nice little packs in which they had earphones and some other goodies in that. And the food that they used to serve on the flight was also actually much better quality than what Indian Airlines would do. So they gave you a better experience, but for roughly the same cost or slightly more cost. Right? So they did not compete on price, they competed on better experience. Right? So that's what. So there are these three different strategies, right? And it is very important for all of you to think about what is that one strategy that you want to use, right? I'll give you one more example, an example that I was personally involved with. Example of, this is example from the Yellow Pages, please. So long, this Yellow Pages, people are aware of Yellow Pages? These thick books which have all the phone numbers of different, businesses, even actually individuals are called white pages, but businesses called Yellow Pages, right? So that's the Yellow Pages. Yellow Pages were delivered to doorsteps by the telecom companies so that you could make the phone calls and they would make money, right? That was the business model, so to say. So it was free of cost to an end user. It came to you for no money, right? And it was with you in your house. The effort required was to flip through the pages, right? So it was a reasonable amount of effort because, it was alphabetically sorted, so you had to actually find, and there were many categories, so you had to do back and forth. And performance was poor because it's known that 20 to 25% phones, change every year. So the old numbers, have to discard it and you have to replace them. So, but because it was published once a year, by the end of the year, a lot of numbers would be wrong, right? So that's the three things. Then in 2007, 8, or something like that, 2005-ish, company called Just Dial came, right, which said, that's bad. And that's when the mobile phone penetration was increasing, not the internet penetration, but the simple feature phone were increasing. That Just Dial said, let's make this Yellow Pages available on phone. And to do that, they said, we will make a toll-free number available to you. So you don't even have to pay for that call. Just call that number. You give the name of the entity or the business that you want. We'll give you the phone number. Right there, and you can get the number. They would also send you SMS back. Right. So they basically made it a better effort, lesser effort, lower effort. The cost was higher because you had to make a call, wait. Sometimes you had to wait for the operator to come, So there was a little higher cost in that. Well, actually, phone call was free, but that came a little later. 8888 number came later. Performance was better because they were updating the numbers frequently. Right? So that's basically. And then you would say, okay, this is good. Right? And then the third wave in this came when urban companies started. They said, okay, this is good, but the people who you contact, although the phone numbers are right, but the quality of that person is unknown. It is very difficult for you to get the good quality person. Right? And a contributing factor in that was business model of Just Dial. So you have to ask, so how is Just Dial making money? If they're making the phone calls free, actually that means they are bearing the cost of phone. Right? And there's an operator who's answering your phone. Right? They're paying for that also. So how were they making money? The way they were making money was letting the businesses pay to Just Dial to promote them. Right? Equivalent of what? Actually, I should not say what Google does, because Google results are on the right, so they don't let people promote their listings. But actually, there is no good thing that I can think of. But I think in US, similar Yellow Pages, Craigslist and all allow you to sort and pay. But basically, you could pay to get listed higher in Just Dial. And urban companies said that's wrong. The people who give better service should get sorted and come at the top. Right? So they made the performance as the core focus. They did not worry about the cost. In fact, it might be more expensive to use a urban company service provider because it comes with a service guarantee. And definitely effort was not reduced. You had to actually go to the app and you had to click on a few things. If you're asking for, let's say, a plumber or a carpenter, you had to actually give some details about that. It would not be just make a call and the person will show up, right? So important point here is this, that it is not important for you, if you're building a startup, to always reduce the cost. You should not only think about that. It is also not important for you to always reduce the effort. In fact, sometimes it's better to increase the effort if you can give better performance, right? So just if someone says, I made a product and it is much easier for people to use it, doesn't mean it's a winner in the market, right? Because it depends on how frequently that product gets used. So people are sometimes willing to put in more effort to use a product, and we'll talk about an example of that later. Right? As usual, any questions, please feel free to ask. Right? But what I'll do is I'll give you example of deep tech startups which have used this strategy to basically build a product which has got some adoption in the market. Right? So here's the first example. It's an example of a company which was started by ISC student, PhD student, who finished his PhD, I think 4 or 5 years back, 2019 or so, and person from SENSE, the Center for Nano Science and Engineering Department, next building. And the product they had was a handheld device which can be used to do 7 or 8 different tests, blood-based tests. So normally if you have to do, let's say, for diabetes, for example, if you have to do blood sugar test, or you have to do HbA1c, which is a 30-day or 60-day historical average, you have to go to either to a diagnostic lab, and they will poke a needle and take some blood out, or you can call someone at home who will pretty much do the same thing, right? What Pachot said was that that is too much effort, right? So that's too much effort. So let's make it easier for people to start using this product without going to the clinic, right? Or without going to the diagnostic center or calling someone home to collect the blood. Right? This is important because for diabetes people, they have to do this testing many times, right? Many times in a day. Right? So what they said was, if you can basically take with a pinprick, right? If you can take a blood and that can itself give you the result, that'll be ideal, right? So at home you can do the testing. So that's basically the test they did, right? The reason they were able to do that is because it did not need reagents, right? Typically, if you do a blood test, they take the blood, they send it to the lab, back-end lab, they mix some reagents, and then they are able to figure out, what are the different counts. So the PhD thesis of this particular person was in this area, who came up with this new, figured out new chemical properties, which helped them to do this test without needing reagents, right? So that was a very innovative thing, and that's what they did, right? And because reagents are expensive, the cost is also higher when you go to a diagnostic lab, but using this device is much, much cheaper. So it's more convenient and it's less costly, right? So that's basically what they did, right? So the important point here is that they did not try to claim, or neither they do better result than the diagnostic lab, right? So in other words, well, what kind of strategy is this out of the three? Sorry? Effort and cost, exactly. So therefore, you don't have to always give a better performance, right? You can actually reduce the effort, and that's good enough for lots of people to start using your product, right? Cost, or you can just reduce the cost and maybe not even change the effort or performance, and people might start using your product, right? So there are three different levers you have. You can play with one of the three. You don't have to play with all three, right?
So, but here performance is the only thing what user requires. Performance is the only thing user requires.
No. Performance in this, see, what user needs is when you do the test, your results are accurate, right? Now, if I can give you, so if you go to the lab, diagnostic clinic, lab, and get it tested, you'll get accurate results, right? If you use this device, you will get equally accurate results. So this is not giving you better results, but it's not giving you worse also. So therefore, performance is matching, and yet the product is valuable because it reduces the effort required to use it. You can use it at your home. I mean, we all use this oxygen oximeter during COVID time, right? Everyone would have bought this thing, right? And you're poking, you're putting. Imagine going to the hospital to check, right? You're feeling uneasy. You don't know whether it's oxygen or something else. If you have to run to the hospital to check it, that's lots of effort. But the same device, using at home is much more convenient. So this is convenience-based play. This is not a performance-based play. Yeah. How's the company performing? That's a very good question. We'll come to that. So second example of this is a company called Sigtuple, which is basically in the diagnostic space itself, right? What they do is they build what they call smart microscopes, right? And fundamentally they said, okay, medical diagnostic, same area actually, both are in diagnostics. So this is why I wanted to contrast that, as a founders, as startups, you have different options available to. So what they said, they looked at the same problems. They also said medical diagnostics is an area that can be improved in India. And then they went back and said, okay, why is it broken? Why are there issues? The issue is that there are less doctors or qualified professionals. And the reason is that when you take your blood and the test comes, eventually a pathologist has to, look at it and sign it. Only then it can be sent back to the patients, right? So there is a little bit of, effort required from their side. And the way, let's say a blood count or CBC or whatever you do, the way it's done is often those things are, actually I don't know whether it's true or not, but this is my guess, that the pathologist or someone actually counts how many, of those white blood cell or whatever the counts are there, right? So the intent was here that if you can actually if a smart microscope can start using AI or some other tools to start doing that counting on its own, give back results to the pathologist who can then double check, right? So instead of spending 10 minutes or 5 minutes on doing that, reduce it to, 30 seconds or 20 seconds, whatever, right? Reduce the time that the pathologist has to invest to give you the results. And by using AI and ML, basically you can actually give more accurate results back to the users, right? Why more accurate? Because there is a possibility of human error that comes in when a human is counting or doing that work, right? A AI system complemented or supplemented by a human double checking it, obviously will give you better results, right? So that's basically they did, right? So SIGTuple therefore adopted a very different strategy, which is what? Performance-based strategy, right? So in this case, they did not try to reduce the cost of the device. In fact, this device costs a lot of money to actually buy for a clinic to buy it, right? So it actually costs more money. They did not reduce the cost. In fact, they said we will index or we will only focus on the performance of the product. And if we are able to deliver higher performance, we will be able to convince people to buy your products, right? You can ask the question, how's this company doing? We'll answer that question now.
So for these kind of automated medical devices, don't they have to pass some kind of government checks?
Yes.
Yes. What if somebody sues someone based on the results that were provided by the system?
No, there's a very stringent, all medical devices have to go through a stringent regulatory approval process. So both Pathshodh, that Anushodh product of that, Pathshodh, and this AI 100 of SIGTuple had to go through all the regulatory checks. So you have to do your, you have to do your clinical trials, you have to get approvals, all of that has to be done.
But then where does the liability end? So if something is wrong with the result, let's say.
As of today in India, so it's a regulatory question. So as of today in India, the pathologist still has to oversee it. Therefore, the liability stays with the pathologist, with the lab. At some point in future, and this is a typical adoption cycle of any new technology, the technology gets normalized over time, right? We obviously don't have that yet in India. For example, Tesla's self-driving cars or Waymo. Have you heard Waymo? In San Francisco area, 20 to 25% of taxi rides are self-driven cars. There's no human being, right? So what Tesla did was, they said, obviously you have electric vehicle. Next upgrade of some upgrades later, they said, here's a option for you to, the car will automatically drive, but as a driver, you can override it, right? Then comes Waymo, which says, I will not have driver at all. Right? You get in the car, it has no driver, you enter where you want to go, it will take you there, you pay, and you get out. So it took 10 plus years, but the new technology gets normalized over time. Right? There are still people today who will say, what if this software goes berserk and kills tens of people, right? And I think that's a fair question to ask. So that's but you have to ask, on average, how many people are getting injured by a self-driving car versus a human-driven car, right? And you have to look at that. So if averages are in favor of a technology, then eventually you have to let the technology, do its job. So it is tough. It takes time for people to adopt. And in fact, that's what points to the question, which is, for that reason, you have to find early adopters. There will be many people who say, I don't want to use this new technology, right? Even this technology, right? Because you'll say, what if this is not giving the right results, right? So there will be many labs, diagnostic labs, which will not buy this device because they can't trust it. But there will be some who will say, oh, this is wonderful. I've been thinking about it. If you can do it, I will test it. And if I'm happy, I'll start using it. So those are the people who are called early adopters. And that's what we need to find as startup founders. Yeah? Okay. Okay, you go ahead. Yeah.
I want to make a guess. This company should be performing better than the Pathshodh.
Okay, so SIGTuple performing better than Pathshodh? And your guess is it does, and answer is yes, it is doing better. But the reasons are not. The
Business model was a problem in the previous company.
Business model is a problem in. Okay, we will definitely talk about that in the next session. It is what I call this a value model validation question. So you can always visualize a value model and you can define it, and you can define and you can validate, as in you can talk to customers and see if it will work or not. But till you deploy your product on the ground and see how it's working, you don't know. So when I said I'll answer the question about Pachod and Siktable, soon, I meant in the next class, but we'll definitely talk about it. In detail, we'll talk about both of them. Right. You had one more question. Yes, please.
So India is more of a price-sensitive market, right? So
Yeah.
you mentioned sometime back that the cost is low, the adoption is high, right? So in India, like when the patient goes, some of them don't even take these tests or don't take these medicines because they can't afford it. So why is performance and effort in India specifically, why didn't they go after cost? Because that way, I mean, each diagnostic company is going after. If you're just doing tier 1 cities, and the market size is going to be low.
Right. Right.
So why didn't they optimize for cost? Because it's a price sensitive market.
Okay. Oh, so the question here is, India being a price sensitive country, does it make sense to give better performance or lower effort, and why not focus primarily on cost? Right, that's the question. Okay. So I think India is not a price sensitive country. One second. India is a value sensitive country. So if you are able to deliver good value at the right price point, adoption happens, right? So that's how we have seen repeatedly. And starting from the old story of how shampoo company was able to sell way more shampoo by packaging 1 rupee shampoo sachet rather than the big bottle, right? So I think there are many examples of India being sensitive to value, not price. But second part of your question was, if they have to go after tier 2, 3 cities, which maybe are more price sensitive than, relatively speaking, then would they succeed or not, right? And that again goes back to the value model validation question. So I think that's where we'll have to look at it, like at both Pachod and Siktapal a little bit more closely to see, what role that plays. So definitely we'll revisit that and we'll answer that question. Yeah. It's not a trivial answer. So it's a fair question, but I think I do want to emphasize India is not only price sensitive, it is value sensitive. And at Axel we saw that with Flipkart, the way it was able to compete with Amazon was not necessarily by reducing the prices so much that they are always beating Amazon on price, but by reducing the quality of performance little bit and increasing the value that the customers perceive, right? And how did they reduce the value of or the quality of performance little bit? By saying, instead of delivering it in 2 days, we'll deliver it in 3 days. Instead of making sure everything can be returned, we can offer you replacement. Right? So there are many ways you can actually say, I'll deliver the product to you at a lower cost, but not at the lowest price. Right? So there's a slight difference between the two. I don't know. Does it make sense? Yeah. Okay. We'll definitely go deeper into that, because it's very important to for Indian startups to not be only worrying about the price and only going to the world saying, I have the cheapest product. Because there is a negative correlation with the cheapest product. Cheap product also correlates typically in people's mind with lower quality. Right? So if you have higher quality product and you're offering the lowest price, people think there is some problem. And you want to avoid doing that. So, I think you had a comment, not a question. Someone, okay. Okay. So what I'll do is, I will show you 3 different 1-minute videos, right? And the reason I thought it'll be interesting for you to look at these 3 is because we actually talked about edtech companies in the last class. We talked about Vedantu, we talked about a little bit about Byju's, we talked about PhysicsWallah. So let's look at the first 3 that became unicorns, right? And I want you to look at them and say which value model they had adopted, right? So this is in order of Byju's, which got started first, then Vedantu. I think Byju's started in 2010, 2011, something like that. Vedantu started in 2014, and Unacademy started in 2017, 2018, or something like that, plus minus 1 year. Okay, so let's look at Byju's first. And how does one get the sound?
Video games.
Is there a way to, is there a way to get the sound on the TV? How? Escape करना है? ये क्या हो गया? End show. Settings चाहिए? बढ़िया, thank you. All right, let's see.
Mom, Dad think all I do is play video games.
Oops, bad. चलो यार. क्यों नहीं चल रहा है? फिर से करें? नहीं, वो नहीं, वैसे तो उधर नहीं चलेगा. इधर चलना चाहिए. हाँ, आ गया. Thank you.
Mom, Dad think all I do is play video games.
My dad now.
अब देखना चेक करने के लिए डैड को भेजेंगी.
Mom is here again.
Now watch this. 3, 2, 1. Physics, Dad. It's biology. It's chemistry, Dad.
That's math.
Take a circle, fill it with circles, cut and open.
Okay, I think that's enough. What's the strategy? Which model? Effort. Okay. I will not ask you why, but look at the next one, and then. Yeah. Okay, I know your formula. Escape and then come back again. Okay. Let's do that.
भाई साहब, ये पढ़ाई होने के
Live interactive classes. Download Vedantu.
I'll not touch. Okay, what was that? Okay, now tell me why you're saying one performance, the other effort.
Because they are the emphasis on interactive learning.
Okay, so the way they depicted in what?
They showed a competition and he's like winning and doing all that stuff and
Correct.
going above. So
Yeah.
in the first case they are showing that okay, it is easy now to watch videos anywhere you can see them.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. You had 1 second. You had.
So they can get rid of boring classes, boring lectures, and can access interactive classes which will lead more effective study.
So that's the Byju's. So Byju's basically, if you look at the ad, what it was communicating was the students or what else? Yes, let's call them students, were basically consuming content on their own without getting any oversight from parents, right? And they were enjoying. At least that's the storyline that they had, right? While Vedantu storyline was, there was something going on, but they also showed a leaderboard. Okay, so they also showed a leaderboard, right? So basically, they're bringing in that element. They're bringing in the element basically, which brings in the competition, or the performance of the student itself, right? You had another comment?
Like in the Byju's video, they were more focusing on the tablet, phone, or the medium of.
Chalega, if it comes, yeah.
They were more focusing on the medium of delivery.
Yeah.
Kids are enjoying phone. It's not just they're wasting time on phone.
Yeah, exactly.
They're talking less about the content.
Correct.
Or the way they are delivering.
Actually, they were talking about the content, but they were not talking about you doing well in exam.
Yes.
Right? It is more to have fun or enjoying the content and enjoy learning. They were not there, focusing on that aspect, while Vedantu was focusing more on doing well also. Right? So they brought in that element. Right? So subtle things, but these subtle things come from the model that you have chosen. Right? They're not random. It's not like, the creative agency they hired came up with this ad and they said, okay, let's go with it. That's not how it is. It is dependent on what they themselves think of their company as, and what they, tell their customers, this is my unique value proposition. So that gets reflected here. Yeah, you had yes, please.
So if Vedantu started earlier,
yeah.
would the ad remain the same, given that sometimes you need to give the awareness that you can take classes digitally or something like that.
Right.
So if Vedantu had started early for a new market,
Mm-hmm.
would the ad remain the same?
That's okay. So the question is, if Vedantu was the first to start and not Byju's, would the ad be the same or would that be different, right? And I think so it's a very good point, because if you look at Byju's, 2017 is when this ad was run, right? 2016 is when Jio came to India and made mobile internet okay, so made mobile internet popular in India, right? Before that, actually, the common perception was that that people use the mobile devices or laptops or whatever to play games, right? The our mindset change happened subsequently, actually happened during COVID, right? So that's why the Byju's ad was actually showing that parents are thinking that the children are wasting time. They're playing games and not actually studying, right? So it's reflecting the reality of the world at that time, right? So your point is correct, that the reality of the world gets reflected in the communication that you have, right? Now come to the question, if Vedantu had come first, would their ad be different? I don't think it would have been different. And the reason is that the company started with the core and only target of, giving better education to students. So performance was from day one, the part of their DNA. They wanted to make a company that was giving better education. So that's what is getting reflected here, not the sequencing of, when they came in the market. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
One more observation that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
So in the Byju's, they showed a lot of users, and
yeah.
kind of, for me, it felt like it's easy to get onto the platform and it doesn't cost much.
Okay.
Kind of impression I got from the ad.
Okay.
In Vedantu, they showed one user, and it was like
okay. Okay, so I think your comment is that Byju's ad had three kids, and it communicated that lots of people can use it and it's easy for them. But in the Vedantu ad, there was only one child, right? But I think that's more of a factor of 20-second ad versus a 60-second ad. I don't think, and I could have picked a ad which is equally long, but it's a good observation. Actually, I have not paid attention to that. I'll go back and check again. If implicitly that's coming across, whether one is saying that lots of people are using me, other is saying people are using me, they're benefiting a lot from me, right? So two different possibilities. I have not paid that attention to. That's a good point. I'll take a look. I think you guys can also take a look at that. So.
Ads, we hardly get into the details.
When you see the ads?
We usually get to the big picture.
Yes.
If you talk about a common viewer.
I know. So 10, 20, 60 seconds, very short time. So point, I think, remark is that ads are normally, when as a user, consumer, when we look at ads, we don't analyze them like this, right? And I think that's perfectly fine. I don't want you to start analyzing every ad like this. But I just wanted to bring out that there are different value models that different companies have, and they actually are pervasive. So when I say value model, you should be careful in thinking and picking. It's because everything that you do after that gets influenced by that. So kind of products you build, the kind of features you build, how you talk about your product, what kind of people you hire, what marketing you do, everything changes based on what value model that you use. So it is to emphasize that value models are very important. You should consciously think about them and pick one that resonates the most. That's the point that I want to make right now. Right? So not that you should start analyzing ads very carefully, right? So,
But in the second ad, what
shall I show you third ad also? But yeah, go ahead with your comment.
that come up?
Yeah.
Personally, to me,
Yeah.
is that the student is winning or excited about it.
Yeah.
And Amir.
Yes. Yeah, so Amir Khan, okay, so the comment is that in the Vedantu ad, there are two things that come out very clearly. I mean, they stand out. Number one is that the student or the kid is winning, so to say. And the fact that there's a Shah Rukh Khan or Amir Khan sitting there. Actually, by the way, I think Byju's had Shah Rukh Khan as its anchor, later. Right? And Amir Khan there. And Amir Khan has a personality. Right? And the personality is of a perfectionist, right? So, and this is again, this is not a random thing. It is well thought out from a company's point of view. It is based on what they want to communicate. Shah Rukh Khan is more popular. So the popularity goes there, perfectionists come here. So they're all correlated. So basically ad making is not a random, business. Lot of effort and thinking goes into it. But let me show you Unacademy, and maybe you guys can comment on that. And I'll not show you full.
And now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge. And we are well await the light of being.
Okay. It's a full rap song for 2 minutes, so we'll not see the whole thing. But look at the imagery that they have. Look at what they are trying to communicate. I think it's obvious this is the third angle, right? People agree, right? Any comments? You think it's a access-based thing? Right? Go ahead, yeah.
So this ad is clearly about a mission. It's trying to attract people who have a mission
Okay.
to crack something.
Yeah.
They are very, very focused.
Yes.
And they are trying to convey that, like, you are so particular about your targets.
Right.
We are there to assist.
Yeah, exactly.
I think out of all three ads, this is most specific to their audience.
No, so okay, let's take a step back. So comment here is that Unacademy compared to the other two have emphasized a lot on the cracking exam parts of it, and therefore maybe talking more directly to its audience, right? So that's the comment. But I think I'll take a step back and first ask you to look at the imagery, right? If you look at the imagery that they had, first of all, the people who are studying are all getting up early in the morning, right? I mean, they're showing a dark thing, right? And if you look at the kitchen in which the chai was made and the platform and all the thing, it is all about people who don't have access to higher end or higher or more expensive education facilities, right? So that's the imagery they have actually captured here, right? So that's what is undercutting here, that, here's a platform that is available to everyone, right? Then on top of that, they're layered in the thing saying, if you use us, you will crack your exam, right? Which is why the let's crack it, which is a very commonly used thing. Did you crack the exam is what they anchored it on, right? So that's how it is. So I was emphasizing more the access part of it to showcase this, that there are 3 ways of building startups, 3 different ways, and you should pick one of them. And each of them is actually equally correct way of building a startup. It's not to say one is better than the other, right? Which is why I'm resisting the questions about which one out of Sictuple and Pathshodh, which one did better. I'm resisting that because all 3 are actually valid ways of doing startups. It should be your goal to pick one of these 3 to build your startup, right? And that's the more important thing, not which one succeeded or not, because there are many reasons why people succeed or not succeed, but that's basically what I wanted to point out, right? So 3 different ways, pick one of them, but pick only one. Don't say I'll have the cheapest product. No, I have the best performing product and I'll have the cheapest product. No need. In fact, your cheapest product might actually counteract against your best performing product. So if you really have the best product, you should price it more. Let people pay more for it, right? So that's basically more important points. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
By effort part, you essentially mean the effort required to use your product.
Yes.
And the goal is that it should be lesser.
Yes. Yeah. It's an inverse of effort. So
can it be tied up to cost in some way?
No cost. Oh, well, okay. So the question is effort, what is the effort dimension? Is it lower effort to use the product? And answer is yes. Second question is cost also part of effort?
Because you cannot distinctly separate out the 2 things. Sometimes you cannot
Correct.
because you don't have enough money.
Agree. So is cost also part of effort? So I would say the reason performance is on top and the other 2 on the bottom is because performance is output, right? We had value equal to output divided by input. Input has 2 components, effort and cost. So what we have done here is we have separated them out, right? So they are both input and therefore they sometimes overlap with each other, right? And in people's mind sometimes there is it's difficult to pull them apart. So I think what your point is valid and I acknowledge that. But the important thing here is that cost is a very, very powerful lever, right? That you can actually use to break open an opportunity for yourself, right? So therefore, I have pulled it out and made it separate point. But basically, both of them at the bottom are input parameters, and we need to look at input in one way. We have to look at output in a different way, right? That's the more important point.
Yeah, I was saying that. I think in that they are also trying to criticize the offline centers, stating that there is a hub they have created. If we see the model of an academy, they have made Kota factory and all this stuff.
Yes.
They're trying to criticize the model that you have centralized the education system in India.
Correct.
So we are trying to decentralize it and make it available to all the students in all part of the country.
Right. So the comment about Unacademy doing what they're doing is also basically one more element of it is decentralizing and making it available to many people. And I think that's actually very, very important and valid point. In fact, if you go back and read the interviews of the Gaurav's interview or whatever, you will see that, one of the things that he talks about is that the education, the way, forget about education, the way the coaching institutes work right now is there's an entrance test, and only if you do well in the entrance test, if you crack the entrance test, then you are part of the coaching institute, and within the coaching institute, the students who do well get part of a elite group that gets better teachers. So it's a very tiered, or there's a layers in this education system, coaching system that we have, and Unacademy is going against it. which is why the choice of rap music also. It's going against the current way the things are, right? So clearly that element is very much part of the company's ethos, right?
I guess the target demographic also affects the value model. Like Unacademy is targeting competitor exams, and there are people ready to give the effort.
Correct.
So they focus more on the other aspects.
That's fine. Yeah. So I think comment is that does the target audience also, target customer base also plays a role in the value model? I think there are two questions. Does it play the role in creating the creatives? I think let's not go there because that's a separate thing. I think question we should ask is, does it play a role in the value model that you choose, right? And I think my answer to that is no, it does not. I think you can, for that entrance exam student, you can actually build a cost-led strategy, you can use performance-led strategy, or you can use effort-led strategy. So I don't think value model depends that if I go after this user base, I will have to pick this value model versus other. I don't think so, because the reason is eventually, if you want to become a large company, you have to win over the whole category anyway, right? You can't win by saying only for the banking exam, entrance exam students, I'll crack it. I mean, I'll do a good job for others I want, right? Which is why later all three did everything. So Byju's does as much entrance exams as Unacademy. Vedantu boasts that, so many students, crack JEE exams there. So I think all of them are doing everything. The question is, when did they get started and what was the initial value model they used at that point? Does the value model determine the initial customers? Yes, that is correct. So I think does the user model determine value model? No. But value model does have an influence of which initial users you'll go after. Yeah.
In this case, all three are doing the same, and they have pitched differently to customers. Ultimately, they're all targeting the same set of customers. So when we really compare the competitors,
yes.
What should be the mindset? Because
right.
We have to target a niche segment. It starts from there.
Yes.
But how do we look at a larger picture?
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So the question is, if eventually all three of these are doing Vedantu, Unacademy, and Byju's are targeting everyone, then how do they differentiate themselves? And as a startup, when we are thinking, what should we do? And I think the answer to that is actually, it is important when you're converting your idea to a startup, and from that early stage of startup to what's called a product market fit version of the startup, the idea is to actually figure out what would work the best for you, and therefore which customers you want to go after. After that, there's a different path, right? Post product market fit is what eventually they were competing with each other. But in the beginning, they actually had three different value models. They were going after three different sets of users, and they actually were all able to establish the need for their product just by doing that. So we are only focusing on that part of it. What does it take for a startup to deliver value to its initial set of customers and get initial revenue so that and the world knows that you are succeeding? Right? So that's basically, right now we are emphasizing that. What happens after product market fit? Another story, different lecture series, not now. Yeah. Yes, sir. Can value model differ based on the country? So value model depends on the maturity of the category. Typically, in a new category, if you look at EdTech as a category, in a new category, typically you want to start with the effort-led strategy, because by making it easier for people to start using your product, it is easier for you to go acquire customers. If there's already a customer which is already giving effort-led strategy, has made it easy for people to use it, then you want to get to the next step, which is performance-led strategy. So you want to say, here's a better product than what you are used to right now, use my product. Once you have those two, and someone comes after that, the only gap available is access, which is lots of people are not being served by these two, therefore I'll do something else. which is what Unacademy did, and which is what later Physics Wala did. Right? They took a different angle on access, which is language as an access. Right? So they said, we'll teach you in local languages and low cost also. So that's the third thing. Right? But so those are three things. So it depends on the country, to the extent that the maturity of the category in different countries can be different. Right? So if you have a product that you're building for the world, different countries in the world will respond differently to your product, and you need to therefore pick your target country very carefully. Right? So same product might not resonate across the world. Right? That's basically the point. Yeah. Yes, please.
Let's say like a product-based company.
Okay.
Wouldn't the cost-led model be difficult to like create a differentiate? Isn't it easy to get commoditized if you just go for a lower cost?
Okay, so the question is, if we are product-led company, does cost access-led strategy, does it commoditize the product and therefore negatively impacts us? And I think that's answer is yes. And that's actually a good way for us to get to the next part. But if there's any other question, then okay. Okay, this graph. Okay, I'll answer that question in the next part here. So
here the effort isn't it the same for all the three cases? Because Byju's effort is less when we compare it with tuition or offline classes. Now the other platforms also have the same effort that Byju's.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is about this graph. Why does Byju's effort is so low? Right? I mean, it's an inverse of effort, right? So Byju's has the lowest effort. Actually, eventually they might have the same effort, but if you look at the initial target audience, then Byju's actually invested a lot of time in coming up with what they call ontologies of the content, or how different topics are connected with each other, and how they can navigate users to, say, if you have let's say understood quadratic equations, then you can go understand circles and ellipses. But if you're doing ellipses and you have not yet figured out quadratic equation, go revise it. So they had done a very good job of navigating people and helping them to understand content in a more intuitive way. So because they had extra emphasis on this, they made it easy. That's why the effort is low. Vedantu, on the other hand, started with online tuition as its core focus, and it said that what we will do is make the best teachers available to you. It actually made it tougher for students to take the education classes, because they were monitoring the kids. They had 70 different parameters, and you could not, they were tracking how your mouse movement is happening and all of that, so that they could see which students is paying attention, not paying attention. So in that sense, they actually increased the effort. They did not reduce the effort. They made it tougher for students to pay, they had to pay full attention, right? But in return, they made a promise saying, if you take 75% of my classes, do 75% of my exams, tests that I give, and you don't improve your performance, then I'll give the money back. That's the promise they made to parents. So they actually made the effort, the effort was actually, it should actually be reversed. That's not true. Unacademy was only videos, so you had to go consume the videos, and there was no stringing together of videos, right? But Vedantu had strung together videos or whatever content, but they made it, they wanted students to pay attention in the class. So that's why the effort is little more for these guys, even more for Unacademy, because you had to go find your own content, right? So three different. All right, okay, let's get to the second part. Which place is this? This, Some fort in Maharashtra, okay. One more, the same fort in Maharashtra. Which fort is this? Sinhgarh, no, not Sinhgarh. Sinhgarh is a much bigger fort. One more guess? Random guess. No, so this is a fort called Tolna Fort. This is the first fort won by Shivaji, right? And that's where he started his, so to say, Hind Swaraj, whatever it was called. And the point I wanted to make was, start with one fort, win one thing, one value model, get one set of customers first, before you aspire to win 300 forts or 400 forts, which is what Marathas eventually won, right? So start with one sharp focus, win one thing, and then let's get to the broader things. So now let's talk about, so what do we do about the value model and how do we choose them, right? And that's the part here. This is the second part. And I wanted to emphasize that eventually there are only two types of companies in the world, right? If you look at any mature market, there are only 2 or 3 players in the market. And you have to ask why. Why is that, right? And the reason is actually eventually there are only 3 kinds of companies that are there in the world, eventually as in mature markets. Right? One is customers who are treated or who are perceived as premium vendors, service providers, or they are mass market, or they are challengers. Right? So as of now, in India, Amazon is considered with a premium service provider in e-commerce. Flipkart is the mass market, with the largest market share, but lower profit margin. Right? Amazon's profit margin is larger than Flipkart. And there's Meesho, which is actually number 3, I think, right now in the market. It's still figuring out, does it want to go here or does it want to go there? Right? So that's basically, eventually, it's true for every category. Right? So here's an example of another category which you will recognize very, very easily. Right? So Apple versus Android, obviously, one is on a premium side, other is not on the premium side. Windows is actually dead. Challenger is no longer alive. One more example. And the reason I'm choosing different sectors is just to show that this is true for every sector. It's not just one sector, hardware, software, everything it applies. Airtel, Jio, and Vodafone or V. Also true for software companies, Zendesk versus Freshdesk. Anyone knows that Blue Cloud? Which company is that? Salesforce, right? So Salesforce versus Zoho versus Freshworks, right? I think, so Freshdesk started as Freshdesk and then became Freshworks, and I'll talk about that soon. But Zoho is very well established as a mass market company, right? Freshworks is actually figuring out, does it want to be competing with Salesforce, or does it want to be competing with Zoho, right? And I will have example about that very soon. Right? You might say, okay, that's all random companies, but what about deep tech companies, right? And I think equally true for deep tech companies, whether it's, you look at, this is the robotics world. Fanuc, if you look at it, always treated as, premium company. And they, not only that, it's treated as premium company not because their prices are more. It's because they actually spend lots of time to make sure that they have the highest reliability and the uptime is the highest, right? So, and they also go after these use cases that require those kind of, precision, right? So there's a lot of work that goes on once the company DNA gets decided, right? So that's basically, that's what they do. And on the other side, if you are in the mass market business, then of course you want to go after much larger customer base, which typically is more competitive pricing, typically have smaller manufacturers, typically have slightly lesser requirements about the performance, right? And instead of very specialized tasks, you focus on more general tasks, right? So that's basically how companies themselves start differing over time. Yeah.
What's the CNC?
CNC is that this वो जो cutting होता है ना in the, huh?
I thought it was some.
Oh no, yeah. The lathe and the precision. All right, so these devices or equipment you might see in ISC labs. Anyone has comments? Do you see more Thermo Fisher or do you see more Danaher? Anyone in biology, chemistry? Huh? Thermo Fisher is more. Right? And that's because Thermo Fisher has taken that positioning that it will go after this broader market and it is used more in universities, labs, startups, and those kind of things. And Danaher, on the other hand, and Beckman Coulter is one of the subsidiaries of Danaher, has taken a completely different positioning, which is the industries which have higher requirement for performance, right? Which is clinical diagnostic, pharma companies, wherever you need to do FDA approval or the, what is IVD? IVD is in vitro diagnostics, right? So basically whenever you need to do diagnostics or drug discovery, you basically use Danaher. Right? So that's basically different businesses, no matter which category, have different companies which have taken different positions. So either you are a premium market company or you're a mass market company, right? And question then becomes, so how do you decide? And the answer to that is that you decide based on the founding team. It is the founding team that decides, right? So here's an example of, let's try this again. Can I get rid of this? Oops, no, I can't. Okay, whatever. Okay, so as I told last time, Tejas Networks is the number 3 or number 4 in the world in terms of network devices that are built, right? And you look back and you have to ask, okay, so why did Tejas become what it has become, right? And in this case, Tejas basically has taken a performance-led strategy. All from day one, it has taken a performance-led strategy. And you can see this in the quotes that is, from the Gururaj Deshpande, who was one of the investors and a partner company of Tejas, right? Who, when he was introducing the team, the founding team, so the founders were Dr. Kumar Shivarajan. He was the professor at IISc. He basically left IISc to start this company. There was Sanjay Nayak, who was the CEO of, I think, Synopsys, and he left that to become the CEO founder of this company. Right? And there was one more person who was the COO of the company. Right? He was also very well accomplished. So and Gururaj Deshpande was an investor in the company. So when he was introducing this company to the world, he said that the Bible of optical networking, which is the book that everyone reads, is Sycamore and other optical networking companies, was written by Dr. Kumar. Right? So, and also when they first said, and this is what Sanjay Nayak said, that Tejas will be India's first globally competitive product company. And this is back in 2000, 99-2000. Right? So that's when they started. So the DNA of the founders themselves was that they wanted to build a performance-led company. It was not imposed from them on them from outside. It came from within. Right? It is the founding team that decided that the kind of company I want to build is performance-led company, and I want to be a premium company. Right? That's the decision they made, and that's where everything came after that. Now let's look at Pachot, which I said I will talk about a little bit more. So this is the founder of Pachot was Vijay, Dr. Vijay. He did his PhD at IISc, and when he introduces Pachot, he says there are 3 P's in his life. First P is pathology, which he says that basically he got detected as diabetes type 1 when he was in, let's say, high school. And at that time, the doctors, he was from a village near Varanasi, and the doctors told parents that pull the kid out of the school, because actually he fainted a few times because the sugar spike and because of that, and he had to take injection regularly. So basically, pathology or the diabetes has been with him forever. Right. Second P was PhD. Right. So basically, he joined IISc to do PhD, and by the end of his PhD, he basically published papers, and he came up with this new way of electrochemical sensing, which was able to detect all these things using that chemistry was able to detect all these different things and give accurate results back. So that's the second P, PhD. And the third P is Pachot. Right? Based on this, they said, okay, why not we convert this into a product, because looks like the science is working well. Why not build technology around it? Right? So that's basically how the third P happened. Right? And that's where they basically started looking at, now if we have to build this device which is very precise, which is very easy to use and doesn't need reagents, right? That's the alternative to that was the diagnostic labs, which require 2 to 3 crore of devices to be put in there, And which is why for himself also he had to go travel 2-3 hours or 20-30 kilometers from his village for the diagnostic testing that he had to do. Right? So that's basically what he had to do. And this is how he talks about saying, when he was young, this is how he studied using this. This lamp, kerosene lamp, was a special lamp, was used only when guests came. So they used this lamp. This is the buffalo that they had, and this is the cycle that they use basically. Right? So it's basically an upbringing that made it obvious for him and Professor Navakant Bhant, his co-founder, to focus on access as the initial strategy, and then effort, like everyone should be able to use it, as the subsequent strategy. Right? So that's basically how it informs the founding team's ethos, gets reflected in the startup, and it informs what the startup does. Right? So that's where I wanted to emphasize, as the founding people or founders of the different startups that you have, or the students that you have, eventually when you do your startups, you have to let your personality reflect in the startup you're building. Right? Don't build something that does not align with what you are, right? Because it's going to take you 7-10 years to build a startup. So might as well be you yourself rather than pretending to be someone else, right? So that's basically it. So this is where I think they were. And then, once you have all of that, then I think the rational mind starts explaining it. And I think these are the explanations. Saying the labs are not available, they're expensive, 80% of India doesn't have, or 80% of the equipment in India is imported, we can actually build much better, much cheaper in India, and so on and so forth. Right? So that's basically okay, that's clear? Any comments, questions? Nope, okay, good. So let's get to the last bit, and the last bit is about, actually before last bit, a quick note, that the access model can change over time. So I wanted to emphasize that. And here's the example, like I mentioned, that Freshworks, Freshdesk, when it started, it was very much a reaction to Zendesk increasing the price. So Zendesk, one given day, increased the prices by 100%. Right? And there was a big backlash amongst its user base. Everyone was complaining on the internet. And that's what was a trigger for Freshworks. And Freshdesk said, okay. So Freshdesk said, okay, we'll launch a good product, but what we'll do is we'll make sure our highest price is lower than their lowest price. Right? So very, very dramatic, saying we will not charge you much money because we want everyone to use it. Right? So that's where they went heavy on cost. Right? They went super heavy on cost. So this was in 2011, 2012. But even in 2017, this is 5 years after they had 50,000 customers by that time, paying customers. Right? If you look at the pricing of Zendesk and Freshdesk, even then, they were not lower than the lowest then. They had slowly increased the price, because price is never the competitor. It is a foot in the door strategy, is never the end strategy, right? But it was still lower than the price that the Zendesk was asking. So the DNA or the value system that they had was getting reflected, but not forever. Right? At some point, they said, okay, that's enough. This is only this much market. We need to now go after all the business software solutions that are out there. Salesforce was the largest customer out there. Right? Okay, that's a Salesforce. So let's go compete with them. Right? And that's when they went after, this is in San Francisco, when they started competing head-on with Salesforce. They actually changed their value model from cost to effort. So they said, let Salesforce be the performance leader, or let Salesforce be the premium company. We will be the mass market company for everyone else. So that's basically the strategy they used. And you can see how it gets reflected in how they communicate their story to the world. Right? So the value model, the DNA of the company does not okay. So the DNA of the company will be dependent on who you are, right? But as a strategic thing, you can actually choose a different value model. So you can always say, access is not my, I prefer high-end products or whatever, fashionable products, whatever you want to call it. But as a tactic, as an entry strategy, I will use access as a entry strategy. Eventually, I'll switch to what really I want to do, which was the case of Freshers. Eventually, they became the effort-led company. Always they started with a Excel-led company, right? All right. Okay, so last part and last question. Which place is this? Any guesses? It's in Germany. Okay, good. Perfect. Yeah. Wow. Exactly. So this is the actual castle on which the Disney castle got modeled, and the whole Disney, across the world. It's a castle called Neuschwanstein. It's in South Germany. Beautiful castle. All right. So let's wrap this up by just looking at these three, and therefore you have to ask why these three, right? Why not more? Why are there only three? And this is for that we go back to the equations, and I refer to them. Output value is output over price, and if you look at the next order of that, basically output is the performance, right? More higher performance, and on the input side you have lower effort or lower total cost of ownership. And those are the three ways in which you can create value. Right? We can obviously split performance into two parts, which is performance and experience. So, right in the beginning we said Starbucks does not give you better coffee. Maybe gives you worse coffee than your filter coffee that you can get elsewhere, but it gives you better experience. So you can split the top into higher performance and higher experience, but the bottom is basically lower effort or lower total cost of ownership. Right? And that's why there are only three ways of doing startups. Okay? Yeah, please. Total cost of ownership. What is TCO? TCO is total cost of ownership, which is not just the price you pay upfront to buy a product, but the recurring cost you have to do to maintain and to use the product. And typically in a car, a TCO of a European cars is higher than a TCO of a Japanese car or a Korean car, because the cost of repairs of European cars is much higher. The parts that you have to buy to repair them, actually the parts you have to buy and the repair cost both are much higher. So the TCO, even if the car are competitively priced, the TCO of a European car will be much higher than the Japanese car typically, or Korean car, right? So that's the TCO. So it's important in business cases to worry about the total cost of ownership, not just the upfront cost. Yeah. Okay, so I will finish by emphasizing and highlighting or contrasting with one very well known and very misleading framework that everyone in the world adopts, which is why the reason is because it was one of the first mechanisms or approaches that was used to explain how do startups succeed in the world, right? And this is called disruptive innovation, and it's from this book, which is written by Clayton Christensen, who was a professor at Harvard. Right? And this is how typically the model is explained, and I think you would have implicitly heard about it, if not explicitly. The implicit or the explicit story is this. If you are a company, which is the first red line, then typically you look at any product, over time it keeps improving. Right? If you look at this MacBooks, for example, every new release has a better version, more better screen, better CPU, more memory, and all of those things, right? So you keep improving. That's your first line. What happens is at some point, which is this line, what you offer to your customers is more than what they want, right? So that's where I think most customers, what they call, are overserved by companies. The reason these companies do that is because they're chasing the top line, which is the most demanding customers who are willing also to pay the most money, right? So a laptop like this big MacBooks, I think some of you will be carrying it, on which you can run those your language models, right? They are very, very performant, but most people don't care. They don't need that, right? But as a strategy, Apple will pursue that, and they'll keep going after this line, which is what makes this bottom line possible, because there are enough customers out there who don't need all of that and who don't want to pay for also all of that, right? So that's basically what is it. And this is what is used to explain nicely, and actually very beautifully it explains this trend that we have seen in computing, right? We had mainframes which were costing $2 million. Very few people had access to it. Then came mini computers, 1/10 the cost. More people started using it, right? Then came personal computers. Everyone in their house got it. Not everyone, but a lot of people got it. 1/10, actually 1,000 the cost. Yeah, 100 the cost. And then came handheld devices, which are now effectively computers, which are again 1/10 the cost, right? Now everyone has one in the pocket, right? So that's how it explains that every step you can actually come up with a better product by underserving the customers, by coming up with inferior product, which is, good enough for a lot of people, right? And that's what the trend has been. And therefore, what you need to do if you're a startup, you have to think like this. You have to first and foremost think about business model, which is that I will basically, so this is the first line is your established companies, which what I call incumbents, and second line is the startups, right? So what the established companies do, they do tweaking on the business model. They keep changing it a little bit, reduce the price and so on. But they keep offering better and better quality products, and they go after the existing markets, right? What they don't do is they don't go after this customer base, which is the new segments which are not using the products, which is what makes a product available, or what makes the opportunity available to everyone, all the startups, right? Example of this is here, right? Anyone who use Nokia phones? Okay. So this, I don't know, I doubt anyone had used feature phone. Has anyone used feature phone, Nokia's feature phone? Okay. All right, so this is my first feature phone. This is my first phone, which is slightly bigger screen. Then this phone, which actually was quite popular because it had camera. They actually partnered with Carl Zeiss and got the lenses from them, and they said image photography is very important. So let's give the best lenses and let's give the best camera phone available. Then they said, okay, but the people who pay the most are the people who play games. So they actually came up with a gaming phone, right? So it had all these things. It had actually a joystick also here. So you'd actually do this thing. You could actually play. It's a full-fledged gaming device, right? So that's what happened. And then they got disrupted. Famously got disrupted by iPhone in 2007, right? And that's basically, it came in and it basically changed the world from there. So you have to ask yourself, so what strategy did iPhone use? Any guesses actually before I show? Huh? Effort, exactly. Because if you look at it, the Nokia phones, each of them individually was actually giving very, very high performance, right? Of course, they didn't have touchscreen. So there was one part of it that basically it was tough to use that phone, right? It was you had to punch those things many times and all those random things you had to do. So this is what Apple did. They said touch screen, everything is easy to use, you don't need a keyboard, right? The other thing they did was actually add internet browser as the primary element in the phone, right? For Nokia, it was a communication device. For Apple, it was a internet device, right? So a fundamental shift in mindset, but it was not higher performant than than Nokia, right? So therefore, to put it here would be wrong. It was not that they went after the least profitable users, and it was not that they actually reduced the quality of the product. They actually went after a different dimension. They went after the effort dimension. The product was priced higher, and it did not go after the underserved market. They went after the market that they thought can be served even better. They can deliver, better value to them, right? So they went after a different user base. In fact, the most valuable user that the Nokia had, they actually pulled them away slowly, right? So therefore, the way to think about value model is not only the disruptive value. I mean, you don't have to reduce the price. You don't have to think of business model. Think about the value model. Think about how you will differentiate yourself from the existing incumbent in the market. Pick one of the three, and I think likely will succeed. All right, so that's it from my side. And I will leave with this. That's the last slide. Any questions?
During when Apple came,
Yes.
was it more price than Nokia or it was less? And eventually they increased or
So Apple was priced higher. Higher. So the phone that was there, the flagship phone that Nokia had, E97, and after that they introduced N97, was priced roughly the same or lower than the Apple phone. Apple also not only did that, they also forced you to sign a 2-year contract with the telecom company. So it was, what is this thing called? Jailbreak को क्या बोलते हैं? Correct. So you could not switch out of those two providers. So not only they were pricing it high, they were also forcing you to choose only one of these two operators, which was unusual in the telecom world because you bought phone from one place and you picked the telecom provider and you switched if needed. They did not allow you to do that. They said, no, you have to use this. So it was priced higher, but the use of that was much, much easier. And of course, they introduced the apps concept, right? The whole apps revolution was started by Apple. So I think they just made it so much easier to use that people said, okay, it's fine. We can pay more, we can stick with Verizon and AT&T, it's fine. But its usage actually spiked after that.
So Nokia was well established during that time, right? So why didn't they just saw it is selling? So let us we also make the same product. What is the problem?
They did, which is what N97 was. N97 was a touch phone. It had a touch screen, but what they could not do was to get rid of this keyboard. So the keyboard made it thick. One. Number two, they had Symbian operating system, which was not amenable to a browser-based applications. So they came up with a new version of Symbian for that. Right? So it is not that trivial for companies to just flip over. They did attempt, right? They did try a lot, so they eventually tied up with Microsoft. They eventually got sold to Microsoft. Correct. So I think exactly. So what happened when Apple introduced this, the rest of the world woke up saying, okay, actually mobile phone is an internet first device. Internet will be consumed from mobile phones. The world recognized that. That's when Google acquired Android and they made it for free, right? They went on the cost angle. They said, everyone can use it. I will not charge you for that, except you'll have to do 2 or 3 things. You have to use my location services. So you have to use my GPS and all that. You have to use search, and there was one more requirement. YouTube, okay.
Android, even the initial versions, I think it
right.
was called Gingerbread also.
Okay.
It came up with a YouTube install.
Okay. Yeah. So Google actually did go on the cost dimension, and they said, okay, let's compete with these guys with the cost. We'll make it free, right? For all except these 3 things, because eventually my money comes from that. My ad money depends on that, so I will use that. So it's indirect monetization, not direct monetization. Right? So stuff for people to compete once you have a strategy which kind of goes counter to their core DNA. The DNA of the company, and I think the other point I want to make here is, Apple obviously is a premium market company, right? So therefore, you don't have to be performance-led strategy company to be a premium company. Apple always has been a second or third player they're not the first in the market. Typically, in the initial days they were the first to do graphics, they were first to do a lot of things. But in the last several years, they've been fast follower, or what's called last mover advantage. They move in last, but they come with such a good product that you don't shift out of them. Right? So first mover advantage is not what they go after. They go after last mover advantage. Right? Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
On the cost part,
yes.
You are a startup who is building a product which is going to sell at a cheaper cost.
Yeah.
So when you are building the company, you have to cut down on a lot of corners. You have to pay people. Either you raise a lot of money from the VCs and you go in debt for a long time.
Yeah.
But so that you get the best in class
people to work for you.
Yeah.
Or the other way is you pay people less.
Yes.
And still cut down. So what do companies typically do? Like those who focus more on.
So the question is, if you are a costless, if you adopt costless strategy, how do you finance your, building the products? Because it obviously takes time and energy to build product, right? So two options are either is money from VCs, or second is to cut corners in the sense of build a product which is, I guess, less features, or third is to pay less to employees. Well, so pay less is one angle which typically will not work, because actually first you have to not look at pay as pay, you have to look at compensation. So compensation can be equity also. So if you give enough equity and pay is low, in cash in hand money is less, that's fine. I think that one can work with that. So I think the strategy would be, actually in all three of them, if you're a product-led company, I think the same question applies. So it's not a cost-led company question, right?
So you are not trying to optimize the cost in other, like performance mean you are charging a premium.
Okay, so you say, okay, it's more of a question, if you charge less and you keep charging less, then therefore you're making less money, therefore your margins are less.
Google could do Android because
Yeah,
of cash.
correct.
Jio could do because bunch of
Yeah. Startup cannot do, so, okay, so that's a good point. So typically costless strategy is adopted by a established player. Typically costless strategy, the company that wins is a incumbent. Typically startups do not win by competing on price. So that, I think you have reiterated the point, please don't compete on price. You can use price as a entry strategy, but price cannot be the only thing. In fact, your primary story should never be price.
You give some examples to chal rahe hain, like that peak of
Path Shod, chal rahe hain, but you have to still make enough money so that you can feed it back into the product and keep improving the product, because eventually someone else would otherwise. See, the startups and large companies always have this competition. You have innovative product, but you have no distribution. The large company has lots of distribution, but no product. I mean, not as good a product, right? If you look at, what ISC uses, the whole of ISC uses Teams for communication, right? Which company revolutionized that area? It was Slack. So Slack was the one which said the official communication is better done over a messaging system like Slack and not email. And their growth was fairly good. I mean, it looked like this. And if you look at it now, Teams is like 5x bigger than Slack, because same thing. Slack had innovative product, but less distribution. Teams had poor product, even today I think, but amazing distribution. So I think, exit strategy, you get acquired, exactly. So at the right price point, I think it's a good idea. Either you become the category defining company, or you get acquired by a company which can define the category. Right? So yeah, we'll talk about exit strategy later, yeah.
Zepto is a startup, right?
Zepto is a startup, yes.
So still they are providing us so many coupons, so they are competing on the price, right?
All right. So question is Zepto startup? Then how are they competing on price, right? Zepto is not just the only example. If you look at rewind back, Swiggy, Zomato gave lots of discounts. Rewind back, Flipkart, Amazon gave a lot of discount. Rewind back, Paytm, Freecharge gave lots of money back. I mean, GPay, yeah, exactly. GPay came later. Paytm is the original, wallet guy, mobile wallet company. Everyone gave cash back. The reason lots of companies give cash back is because you have to change users' behavior. And, you have to actually, to change user behavior, to let them experience it many times. And if you look at today, Swiggy is not giving any discount. Zomato is not giving a discount. You're paying 2 rupees, 5 rupees, 10 rupees for delivery, because you're now so used to it that you're saying, now we have to do it. So I think Zepto is in the market making, Zepto, Instamart, Blinkit are all in the market creating territory. Once people start using it, then they will have to, they will remove the, all the discounts they're giving right now.
Even PayPal.
Exactly. So everyone does that, but that's I would again call it a tactic. It's not a strategy. Anyone else?
I just wanted to just follow up what he said.
Yeah.
Although it looks sometimes like you can pay less and do a cost strategy. Usually R&D costs will be a small part of when you roll out the product, it will be other things like manufacturing and things that will
Correct.
add the cost. And often to produce something at a low cost, you need to actually put on a lot of capital.
Correct.
And for example, like say Tesla, when Elon Musk started out, he took a performance strategy by building an electric sports car.
Yeah.
It's easy to build a sports car compared to a production car. So
Correct.
I would say sometimes cost and strategy not be suitable at all for startup because it will capital requirements.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, I think repeatedly that comes out. So if you go back, look at Tejas Networks, right? You look at the products that they have. They have a suite of products across different areas, right? The reason they're able to do it is because they're able to make enough margin. And every startup has to be able to generate enough margin so that you can reinvest it back into your own R&D so that you can keep improving your product. If your margins are so small that you're not able to reinvest back, then eventually you'll lose the game. Someone else will come and beat you. So I think that's the very important point. So cost-led strategy actually is not a good strategy for a lot of companies. Therefore, we have to think about, are you a premium company or a mass market company? So those are the two angles that eventually you have to look at. And you can be a challenger, still figuring out where do you want to compete, but eventually you have to figure out between the two.
Just a digression, but like China beats you if they are on both of like performance and cost. So in manufacturing, there is no one else who can compete. Performance, they have been tracking for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
If you are a deep tech into manufacturing, I don't know how you can.
So India's exports have gone up from 3% in high-tech manufacturing, 3% to 7.8 or 8% in the last 10 years. So more than doubled. If you look at India, India was around 55-60% exports in jewelry, gems, textile, minerals, unprocessed basically thing. Low end, less quality. Quality is not even an issue. Unprocessed products. If you look at today, that number has come down to 20-25%. Right? So our numbers on a lot of other chemicals, high tech, a lot of sectors have gone up. So yes, it is tough to compete with China, and the reason is because China also has a very interesting incentivization technique for their own startups, right? So they don't compete only on. I think in some sense the labor cost actually has gone up in China. So India, Vietnam are able to do better than them, but I think they do get other kind of benefits. But I don't think it is impossible for Indian startups to compete. And in any case, as a strategy, you can always do, design here, fab there. Of course, it can get copied and all that. There's a risk of that, but I think one can figure out a way to do that. So you do like a semiconductor company I was talking to last week. They were thinking of fabless here and setting giving it to, orders to someone else. So you can always do that kind of thing. So, but that's a operational issue. Strategically, what kind of company you're building is a separate question. So you can always build a premium company or a effort-led company, right? But to make sure the cost way you're competitive, you can come up with the right strategy or tactic or whatever to come up with that. So. All right, with that, thank you so much.